I said this earlier, but a few of you came in. We're going to be talking a lot about NAS today, because that's why we're here. I will be doing quite a few demos, and so if you realize that you would like to be closer to see perhaps a little more detail in some of those demos, at any point, feel free to just move up. It won't distract me. And if you want to leave and go to the Wi-Fi session, I grok that too, and like those guys thought they were in the Wi-Fi session, so that's okay. All right, but we are talking about private cloud, virtualization, more. So what are we going to learn? We're going to talk about why NAS might work for you, for your clients, that sort of thing. Functional things that you can do with NAS, but also fun things, right, that you can do with NAS. And backups, because those fit into all those categories. Essentially, I think the way to approach this is pretend we're not a room of Apple users, and some of you might have HomeKit devices. And so I just have a little Homebridge Docker container running. It says it was started 8 days ago, but really it was started about 2 hours ago because my NAS rebooted. But, you know, there it is. It's up. It's running. You can see I've added a bunch of other ones that I've messed with, or that's what's in their registry. And you've got your images for it. And you can update these images, and it's like I said, it's Docker, so it's all self-contained. It's a little bit weird getting into this world, but you know, it's not terrible. And Synology's web interface or graphical interface for Docker is one of the best that I've seen. You can see what processes are running. You can actually go to a terminal session inside your Docker if you need to configure it that way. Very cool stuff. I mean, this one happens to be using very little CPU, which is great. And in theory, I haven't checked since everything rebooted, but it's probably fine. I'll find out tomorrow when I get home. Fun. All right. Now, virtual machines. So Docker is kind of sort of virtual machines. You can actually run virtual machines on this. This is where QNAP, generally speaking, outshines Synology because they have a longer history of making NAS devices with CPUs that are powerful enough that you might actually want to run a virtual machine on them. Most, I don't want to say most, you know, the higher end Synology units will run VMs. Depending on what you're doing with them, they may or may not run to your liking, but it is certainly capable of that. I think, Mike, you said you have a client or two that's using VMs, and as long as you've got the right hardware for your needs, it works. Really handy stuff. Or, and this is a really nice part, if you've got, you know, a vSphere server or something running, and it dies, and you've got a backup of it, you can just pull it in and run, at least in a pinch, from your disk station, because at least there something is happening. Any questions on any of this before we move into the backup land? Yeah? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can run your virtual machine through a web browser. Is that the only option? I will defer to Mike on that. Is the web browser the only option to run a virtual machine on Synology? Okay. So you can remote into it in other ways, but the web browser is kind of where you begin that process. Yeah. Cool. Oh, yeah, one more question before we go to backups. Are these all x86? In that family, Marvell CPUs and stuff, but yeah, they're, I mean, he's saying a lot of VMs aren't going to practically run on an embedded Marvell chip. Yeah, that's totally true, right? And that's where you might want to go with something that has like an Intel, like, you know, a real processor. Synology's got a couple. QNAP has quite a few more than a couple. They've really sort of targeted that market. Yeah, but yeah, it's a fair point. Yeah, you're depending on what you want to do with it, you may or may not be happy with how it does it, for sure. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about backups. So I know we already talked about Time Machine, but let's kind of pull on that thread a little bit and talk about backing up your Mac with Synology Drive. Of course, this also works with Windows. And this is client-server, not like Time Machine, right? And by client-server, I mean the app on your Mac takes it, whatever it's going to back up, and sends it to an app on the disk station, and then that is what writes it to the disk. It avoids that corruption problem. And so here's how this works. We're here in Synology Drive on my Mac. I say create a backup task. I'm already connected to my NAS, but I could log in if I wanted. I say next, it authenticates me, and then it asks me, what folders on your Mac do you want to back up? And I'll choose a couple here just to, for the sake of argument. We'll get pictures and documents maybe, great. And I'll say next, and it picks where on the disk station it's going to go ahead and put it, which is fine. I'll say next, and I can choose, do I want a continuous backup, a manual backup, a scheduled backup, however that's going to work. And I'll say next again if I want a continuous backup, and that's it. I'm done. Now it's going to back that up on whatever schedule I just chose, and I'm good to go. I can restore files from there. I can go see the files if I go log into the web interface on my disk station, and I've been using this for a while with several of my machines with no issues whatsoever, which is fun. Yes?
Does the Mac client for backup, is it good about preserving all of the Mac file metadata and
Yeah, so does the Mac backup client act like a Mac backup client and treat your files appropriately? The answer is yes. I don't know if it'll do resource forks, to be perfectly honest with you. That may not, but generally speaking, yes, it does. All right, now, Jim earlier asked about backing up your disk station to somewhere else because you've got all this data on there. Yes, it's fault tolerant. Fault tolerance is not a backup. Great. HyperBackup is the app on the disk station that you essentially use to do all this. It's not the only way. You could do it with rsync if you really wanted, but HyperBackup sure makes it look a lot better. You can back up locally to another NAS on your network, remotely to another NAS, like on another office's network, or if you and I trust each other, Jim, we could put NASs at each other's locations, and I could back up to mine at yours, and yours at mine, and you and I don't have to know how to log into each other's. Like, you could have my data but never be able to get to it, that kind of thing. Or to a third-party cloud. And HyperBackup is super easy to use. It's really fantastic. Just, run the client. Here's my backup. I'm backing up to Synology's C2. It doesn't have to be. They were the right price at the right time. But they have all kinds of options. You pick what folders you want to back up, just like any other backup, and tell it how you want to do it, what schedule you want to use, what rotation you want to use, and off it goes. Make sense? Kind of like Arc. Yeah, that's a right, yes. Jim asked, is it kind of like Arc backup, where the software is here and it is, to a degree, I don't want to say platform or destination agnostic, but it's multi-destination. You don't have to use a Synology destination. You can use a variety. You could use, AWS or there's lots of them. And it, just works. Backs it up. You can restore. Easy. You can even back up your virtual machines. I mentioned this before. It actually does a cool thing. If you're using vSphere, once it finishes the backup, your disk station internally will boot that VM to make sure that the backup was successful. And it even saves a movie of it so that you can go look at that movie and say, yeah, like that boots the way I want it to boot. So you don't have to wait. You don't have to go and start it up and wait for it to boot, which might be really slow, right, if your CPU's slow. It does it on its own time, saves the movie of that backup happening, or of the post-backup boot happening, which is cool. And then, of course, you can do instant restore because you could boot right from there. Or you can actually make the new hardware your compute node, and you're up and running and you're done, which is handy. Okay. You can also back up your cloud services with active backup. So if you're using G Suite or Office 365, you can back this up to your disk station. And as Mike pointed out, there's some of their retention policies are like 7 days or something. And that's no bueno. You want to have more of your data than 7 days worth. And you set it, you forget it, and you can choose to retain as much or as little data as you want. I'm not going to show you the demo because we're running short on time, and there's actually a couple of things that I want to make sure we get to. But you configure it the way you always would. You log in, you say where you want the destination to go, and boom, it goes. Make sense? Good? All right. We'll talk about NAS on NAS action here. Let's say you have multiple offices or locations. I've got one client that he works with a lot of film footage, and he's here in LA and then also in Montreal. He needs to have his large files in both places, but he doesn't want to have to sync everything to his laptop because he simply doesn't have enough room. So he uses Synology Drive Sync to sync between the two NAS units so that he puts a big file on his thing in LA, however long it takes across the WAN link, it syncs to Montreal, and now when he gets to Montreal, he connects with SMB or whatever, and the file is there just like it is here in LA. Obviously, you need to make sure you're not stepping on someone's toes in terms of edits and all of that, but as long as you can coordinate your lives, you just locally connected, the data is fast, it's easy, and it's synced without you having to wake up your laptop after a flight. It can be syncing while you're flying, and the data's just there when you get there, which is cool. Good? Good. All right, Cloud Sync, or as I like to say, how to use Dropbox without using Dropbox's software. So Dropbox, if you're on a free account, recently limited us to having 3 devices, which sucks, but I get it. They get to run their business the way they want to run their business. I don't need more Dropbox storage because I have this. But I do need some Dropbox storage because all of you have Dropbox with me, like we proved at the beginning. So here's how this works. The first thing you do is you uninstall Dropbox from your Mac. We can celebrate at that point, right? The second thing you do is you sync your NAS itself to Dropbox. A really nice aside is it doesn't take up one of your client slots when you do this, which is kind of cool. Yeah, it's just like benefit. So you sync your NAS to Dropbox. So now you've got your NAS syncing to Dropbox. And then we go back to what we learned in the beginning. We use Synology Drive to sync a folder to our Mac. And what folder is it? It's my Dropbox folder. And and then we can celebrate, right? Woo! Because now we've freed ourselves from the clutches of Dropbox while still having the convenience of Dropbox. And it worked great. My presentation is on this machine because from my laptop in somewhere, actually it was probably last night as I was making minor little edits, I copied it to my disk station, or to my Mac rather, to my, I call it my Dropbox folder, but really it's just a folder that syncs back to my disk station. And as soon as that file synced up to my disk station and the power came back on, it then synced with Dropbox, and Dropbox synced it back down to here, and it works. It's pretty good. Nice way to get away with it. I will skip that demo too, simply because I want to talk about some other things. Inbound VPN is another one. Just the session, 2 sessions earlier this morning, we had talking about the importance of using a VPN. Well, your disk station can be your VPN server. You don't need to pay for a third-party VPN. It can run VPNs that are native to macOS and iOS with L2TP, or it can run OpenVPN, which is not native, but clients are available and functional and all of that. It's easy to set up. There are no monthly costs, and it's not on a known VPN server IP range. When my family went to China a few years ago, I set them up with so many, I didn't go with them. I set them up with so many different VPNs because we didn't know what was going to work. The one that worked was the Synology VPN that sat at home because the range was not blocked by the Great Firewall. And that turned out to be a really good thing. Ivan, yeah?
If you use the VPN, do you have to ask for ports on a router to get to it, or is it the router?
So if it's your NAS device, this is a great question. Do you have to open ports on your router to make the VPN work? If the VPN is on your NAS device, yes, you must open ports on whatever router you have to point to your NAS for that. Synology's routers actually have an even better VPN server than the disk station does, which is sort of weird. I don't know why they don't have the same one, but yeah. So handy stuff, and it's fairly easy to set up. These are just some screenshots of setting up L2TP and OpenVPN. One last thing I think that I'll get to here before they bring out the hook is Bonjour printer broadcast, or fancy non-copywritten words for AirPrint. So if you have a printer, it can either be a network printer or a USB printer. You can tell your disk station about it. You enable Bonjour printer broadcast, and now your iPhone can print to that printer regardless of whether it's an AirPrint printer. It's now a network printer for everyone, and also for all your iOS devices. And I'll let this video run so that anybody that wants to do this can see it here. But you go into File Services, and in Advanced, there is this Enable Bonjour Printer Broadcast checkbox. You just turn that on, and then you have to add your external device. I didn't have my printer added to this because I have it added to my router instead to do the same thing. But you put in, this printer's an IP printer, so that's how it goes. And you just go through and check the boxes. I'll name it, and that's kind of the end of that. So, fun, right? Yeah, all right. Anybody have any questions?
We have about 1 minute. Let me bring up the microphone so we do get those questions on the recording.
Yep, we'll go over here. Sorry. The question is, how are directory services? I have not done a ton with directory services on the disk station. Mike, have you done a little bit? Is it? Yep. Okay. Or the server. Okay, so yeah, it's fairly capable. I got like 20 seconds left, so.
Quick, talk about the AFP features it can handle when you serve AFP. Does it support Spotlight? Does it support color tagging? And what are the ACLs that it writes? Windows native? Mac native?
Yeah, so yes, it supports. Yes, it supports Spotlight.
And that'll be another talk.
Yeah,
right?
that will be. Yeah, that's a whole other talk. It does fairly well with it. It's fairly robust. Yeah. So, yeah. Talk to Mike. He's the one. Folks, thank you so much for your time. This has been a blast.
Everybody, a big hand.